Good morning. My name is Steve Reed. I'm a pastor at H2O Church in Orlando and a licensed mental health counselor. And thanks for joining us for Mental Health Monday, a place where we take bite-sized pieces of mental, emotional, and spiritual health and try to grow in our awareness of that, because awareness can lead to movement and movement can lead to freedom. And it is for freedom that Christ set us free. So it's really good to be with you on this Memorial Day edition. I trust that you are going to have a chance to connect with friends, family, and just rest. And for those of you that are working today, thank you for your labor. And so today what we want to do is we're starting the story segment of Mental Health Monday, and through the month of September we're going to be looking at a number of different parts of story. So in June we took a look at journaling and some significant research that shows how helpful and healing that can be for us. In July we explored freedom in a number of different directions. In August we were navigating through some of the complexities of dealing with angst. And so here for September, today is just going to be an introduction, but we're going to be looking at the significance and power of story. And so as we do that, I want to just invite you to realize that we're made of story. We don't exist outside story. Some of our challenge is to understand and grab hold of the real story, and that's some of what we hope to do together in September. So, think of the places that these lines take you. In the beginning, God. And just notice that if that story is familiar to you, it paints a picture. And that picture is a picture of 7 days, 6 days of creation and a day of rest. And it's got all kinds of amazing pieces to it. And it's the beginning of that story, in the beginning, God. Or you can take a look at, there was once a man in the land of Uz whose name was Job. And that creates a story in our mind. If you read through Job, there is a wrestling through calamity and a wrestling with who am I, and even more accurately, who is God in my story, and who am I in God's story. Now in those days, a decree went out from Caesar Augustus, and that invites us into the story of the birth of our Savior and a travel on a donkey into Bethlehem. There came a man sent from God whose name was John, and that invites us into a story of a man who wore rough clothing and ate honey and locusts in the barren places, and was called to make way the path of the Lord. And Jesus said a man was going down from Jerusalem to Jericho and fell among robbers. And it paints in our minds that picture of so many well-meaning religious people passing by somebody who is hurting, and somebody who is an outcast and foreigner tuning in and caring well. And those stories are inviting to us. They invite us down a certain pathway in our brain, in our heart. And the reality is, God is telling the world a story. It begins in eternity past and stretches into eternity future. It climaxed 2,000 years ago when God entered his creation in a new way. It could reach its temporal conclusion, where we are in time. It could reach its conclusion today or 5,000 years from now. The theme of the story is shalom. All things in their created place doing what they were created to do in a loving relationship with their Creator. And somehow, in the midst of all of that, we have been invited into this story. God invites you and me as characters in this story, and some of our role, some of our job, some of our opportunity is to sort out what role is my character designed to play? How do I live that out? Because as I live out the path that I have been created to play, I will experience more shalom. Human beings are story-shaped creatures. We're born into stories, we're raised in stories, and we live and die in stories. And so we're going to, in the month of September, we're going to borrow from some individuals who have spent significant amount of their lives digging into story, understanding how story can help heal us. We're going to be taking a look at borrowing some things from Dan Allender, a Christian therapist who's focused on sexual abuse and trauma recovery and the power of story. We're going to take a look at Daniel Taylor, a writer and professor for 33 years who speaks nationally about the power of story. And Michael White, a psychotherapist and family therapist from Australia, who is commonly given a lot of credit for a form of therapy based on story called narrative therapy. And so today we're borrowing from Daniel Taylor, and he offers these words. We live in stories the way fish live in water, breathing them in and out, buoyed up by them, taking from them our sustenance, but rarely conscious of this element in which we exist. And stories are like that. And the more we're aware of the story we're in and the character we are and the invitation to move down a certain pathway, the more we'll be able to lean into that with confidence, with grace, and be able to let go of some of the things that aren't my story. Whenever we have one of those big questions, who am I? Why am I here? What should I do? What happens to me when I die? All of those times we tell a story. The major story, the uber story, the story, the foundational story is the story of God's love for his creation, and all other stories fall in line with that. The single best way of conceiving of faith and a faithful life is a story in which we are each a character. Our life is to be the character in the greatest story ever told. That's what we were created for. And so Dan tells a student of his who chose to live into her story. And she created safe places for abused women to heal. And in that context, she was living into her story. And then tragically, her life was cut short on one day home, and she was in an accident. And at her funeral, Dan was talking with a friend and shared that it's good that Rachel had a story to live into and to live by, because unbeknownst to her and to us, it was chosen that her life be cut short. If she had waited to find a story to live by, waited to have all her questions answered before she lived into the story, she would never have found one at all. Life is too precious and too precarious to live even a single day without story. So we live in stories the way fish live in water, breathing them in and out, buoyed up by them, taking from them our sustenance, but rarely conscious of this element in which we exist. I love that picture. Just be thinking about that. I don't usually give homework, but on this Memorial Day edition at the beginning of September, as we're leading into story, I want to offer you an option and homework if you'd like it. And that is Polaroids. I want to invite you to think about your story. And there are moments in your story that you could take a snapshot of and write down just a few words about it. And it's like a Polaroid camera, just taking a quick snapshot. And as you do that, pick about 10. If you have a few more, that's fine. If you have a few less, that's fine. But pick about 10. And we will work through September in painting a story and finding out, who am I, this character in God's Uber story. For instance, I might pick Brussels sprouts on a plate as one of my snapshots, one of my Polaroids, where I learned I don't get to choose, because that was in front of me and I had to sit until they were gone. And there's a story there. And I might pick Kyle in the middle school courtyard, where I learned that I'm invisible, because even when I tried to talk to a group of friends, Kyle would interrupt and just step in and even turn his back, and it was as if I wasn't there. And there's a story there. And then swim team, where I learned to be respected by people, and I also noticed that I'm only noticed by some members of my family when I fit in a preconceived template, and that can be painful. And I have another snapshot of being at a park with a football and my best friend and his youth pastor, when I learned that an all-powerful God actually cares about my story. And that's a Polaroid image. It's a snapshot of me in my story. And there's that moment on the mountain with a group of men that I had taken up there, and one of them had a fall because we were playing a silly game in the dark, and needed to be taken care of, driven off the mountain. And another man that was with me was really shaken by that. And as we talked, as we walked along and talked along, and I told him some of my Polaroid moments, I found that God could use me to make a difference in somebody else's story. And that's a little Polaroid. It's a snapshot of one of those places. And then there's that moment at a restaurant in Albuquerque, New Mexico, on Nob Hill, that I had been taking Dawn for a Christmas luncheon, and that it was a day after, less than 24 hours after I had asked her to marry me, and she said yes. And there's a picture of my face as I screamed out, she said yes, and everybody in the restaurant looking, and her face going, wait, he doesn't act this way, and there's a story there. And so each of these moments in our lives have a story unto themselves, but they're a piece of the story of our lives. And so here in September, I want to just challenge you, invite you to take enough time to pick some of those, maybe 10 or 12 Polaroid snapshot moments of your story. And they might be some of those hard ones like I shared at the front end. There might be some of those easier ones and exciting ones. And just kind of notice that they are woven together in a tapestry. And we'll work on them together here in September. The better we can tell ourselves our own story, the better we can live it. And so I hope today is a great day for you. My prayer for you is that you do have a chance to have your heart be blessed and calm and experience shalom today, and that this week is a great week for you. All right? Join us next week when we take a bigger bite out of story. Thanks so much.